And that launched some amazing things. Black slaves in what is now Haiti rose up and overthrew their masters after reading that pamphlet. Toussaint was illiterate steward of his master. And and that's the most successful slave revolt in history. Poor women in the streets of Paris led the crowd to storm the Bastille, that symbol of aristocratic power. Armaments workers in Amiens laid down their tools and went on strike. The modern labor movement started right there. Sailors in the British Navy mutinied as far away as Tahiti. Okay, this is the kind of moment that was a very important moment. But okay, that's a very romantic, big picture look at it. I'll bring it down to a much more de-romanticized scale and just tell you about my Uncle David. My Uncle David, he passed away recently at 96 years old. He was a National Maritime Union organizer. He was a ship's machinist. He was a civil engineer. And he used to say, my philosophy is pain. People ain't no good. And they say the corollary is pain. You'll be like, no, David, what's this kind of talk is this? I mean, you're an idealist. You're an activist your whole life. He said, well, that's why I am. Because people ain't no good, I don't think anybody should have more political power or more wealth than other people, because they'll use it to abuse people and the planet too. So that's a more maybe sort of de-romanticized look at the same thing. That is the democratic revolution, the revolution of justice. Okay. Now, the very important thing historically is that for 4,000 or 5,000 years of human history, your chances in life depended almost entirely on what family you came from or who you married. And then for 2 short generations, my generation and my Uncle David's generation, it actually mattered more what you studied or what you did for work for your chances in life. Now, that's not equality, but that's a big way towards it, right? And that led to something that I think is very important. It's what I call Utopia 1966. 1966 was the high watermark of justice. I mean, we had the highest level of economic equality ever. We had a victorious civil rights movement on the march. We had a women's movement on the march. And because of that moment, that high watermark, people had an organic convergence of the big 3 issues. People suddenly saw the unity between justice, peace, and the environment. That's why I call it Utopia 1966, and too many of us in this room actually were around for that. And that's why we're here today, probably, too. But that is a very important moment to remember, because backsliding started after that. 1967 is actually a very sinister year for a reason a lot of people don't know. It was the first year since the New Deal that if you were born that year, you were more likely to be worse off than your parents than better off. Okay? So that year is very significant. The backsliding went from there. I mean, take GDP. When I was a kid, 1.5% of GDP went to the top 1%. That was a lot of GDP for 1%, and they were very well off, by the way. But today, 12% of GDP goes to the top 1%. That's why when I was a kid, there were almost no billionaires, maybe a kind of wacky Howard Hughes or something. But now there are many billionaires, and there's even a trillionaire, our co-president, Elon Musk. Okay. So backsliding has been extreme, and then for the first time again, it's probably more important what family you're from and who you marry for your chances. That is terrible backsliding. And that's why I devoted my life mainly to justice, to the fight for justice, because I wanted to regain that level of justice that would allow us to have the convergence, the organic convergence, the intrinsic convergence of justice, peace, the environment, okay? Well, I got a kind of slap in the face from no other than Mikhail Gorbachev when he spoke to the United Nations in the late 80s, and he said, hey, folks, we've all been working for justice since 1789. He actually literally said 17. And he said, we can't do that anymore because we have an urgent crisis. Human survival is at stake. If we don't turn our attention to nuclear annihilation and to ecosystem collapse, we will not survive long enough to see more justice. Now, for me, that was a chicken and egg conundrum because as I just outlined, for me, and for most of us, we thought you have to have a certain level of justice to get people to move on to the whole big picture because they're too up close to the struggle for survival themselves. And he's saying, yes, that would be nice, but we'll all be dead by then. So this is a real conundrum and one of the reasons for discussing the convergence, but not an answer to it. We did not have an answer to it 10 years ago. We kind of left it hanging like, I guess we all got to work on all that stuff. But that was not an intrinsic unity. That was an alliance. Now, the good news is today I come with glad tidings. I have a hypothesis about the key to the intrinsic unity of the convergence of justice, peace, and the environment. It's the caring society. The caring society, or what you could more militantly call the revolt of the caring class. Okay? Who do I mean? I mean direct care workers. Let me be very specific about that. Direct care workers are people who do low-tech, person-to-person, hands-on direct care. Home care workers for the elderly and people with disabilities. Child care workers. People who do mental health and substance use work in the group homes, in the clinics. People who work in nursing homes. Okay, those are the direct care workers. And why are they the convergence of the three big issues? Well, I'll start with justice, which is the most obvious one. They are the new working class. They are the growing working class. There are 500,000 direct care workers in the state of Massachusetts. Only about 150,000 unionized, 80,000 of those with us at SEIU. They are majority Black, brown, and Asian workers. They are majority women workers. And their wages are terrible. They make $18 an hour non-union, $21 an hour union. That is not enough to pay rent in the state of Massachusetts. And we expect them to do this incredible work for our society. So the justice thing is there, but on the other side, it's a universal thing. We all need care sometime in our life, usually multiple times in our lives. We need, I mean, rich and poor need care. Republicans and Democrats need care, right? We need universal access and affordability for all people to direct care. So this is a big justice fight, and it's a clear one. We need to fight for those workers' wages. We need to get them good jobs, and we need to give everybody access to care. But why the environment? Well, this is very important, I think, to understand. It's something most people are not that aware of. We talk a lot about green jobs and the Green New Deal and so on. I went to I was on the climate jobs panel of the AFL-CIO here. What people mean is jobs and energy. They mean greener jobs than fossil fuel jobs. Very important, very necessary, but those are not green jobs. One of the first things said at the climate jobs table was we need to double the capacity of electricity in Massachusetts in the next 10 years. Double the capacity of electricity in the next 10 years, that's game over for the environment. I don't care what method you use to generate that energy. That's insane. But that's the way people talk when they talk about greening the economy. And there are no green jobs in energy. If you're working solar, you're reliant on lithium, cobalt, things mined by child labor in the Congo. The reason Evo Morales was overthrown in Bolivia because he wanted to protect those minerals for his own people. The reason we have a war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, that Trump is now trying to wheel and deal on the minerals in. I mean, this is, a scourge, even though it's necessary because fossil fuels are worse. Okay, all well and good, but those are not green jobs. Green jobs don't do any damage to the environment. And the absolutely perfect example are direct care jobs. They do not do any damage. They do not use any thermal energy. And that's why the degrowth ecologist from Japan, Kohei Saito, said, you want to know what a green job is? It's a direct care worker's job. Okay, so nothing against the greener jobs, but if we really want a green economy, every dollar we put into direct care is a dollar not destroying anything in the environment. And peace, now we'll get to peace. one of the great accomplishments of the Justice Revolution was the personal income tax, the progressive income tax in America. Okay, we were the first to really do that, ahead of Europe. Okay, that tax is the biggest redistribution of wealth that we do in our society. So that's great, but it goes into two buckets: Medicaid or care, we could say, mostly direct care, or the military. Okay, and the fight is between those two things. Where does that money go? And every dollar that goes into Medicaid is a dollar that does not go to war. Every dollar that goes to the military is a dollar that does not care for anybody and makes war more possible. And we want an example of how that plays out. Let's look at the failure of Joe Biden and the disaster of Donald Trump for a minute. It's all about that struggle. Joe Biden came in and my union busted its hump to elect him because he said, I'm going to win direct care, $500 billion new dollars for direct care, home care, child care, and I'm going to pay for it by higher taxes on the wealthy and multinational corporations. And two senators on the Democratic side, Manchin and Sinema, got up and said, no, we're going to block that. Well, okay, time for horse trading, time for arm twisting, time to win a half a loaf, right? Nope, Joe Biden walked away with nothing on direct care. And then, a year later, he's ramping up a whole massive new Cold War against China, Russia, and Iran. Militarism triumphant, the environment on the back burner as we ramp up natural gas production for the war effort, and direct care status quo. Then in comes Donald Trump, of course, out of the frying pan into the fire, right? He wants to eviscerate the justice of the personal income tax, the progressive income tax, and pay for it by cutting $500 billion of direct care. Okay, so that's the battle lines, as clear as could possibly be. And that's why the good news is we have a convergence that's an intrinsic, organic convergence in the caring society for fighting together as one for peace, justice, the environment. So I say we better build that movement fast because we don't have a lot of time, but it is one movement and we can all be united in it. Thank you.
What we're going to do for the next 10 to 15 minutes is give a chance for you all to respond back and be in conversation with you, Harris. So I'm sure I know many of you have thoughts. So raise your hand. Who would like to ask a question for Harris or make a statement about what you just heard, how you feel, and what we should be prioritizing, really sinking our teeth into here. All right, I saw Eileen first, and then Louise, and then Mary, and then Sunny. We'll start there.
Thank you for your
comments.
I will try to speak up. I'm going to try to speak a picture out of I like the way you did it all together very much. I listened to Ralph Nader's podcast recently, and Eric Kane, a multimillionaire, had started a movement back in Biden's time to tax the millionaires so that we will have people to buy our products. And she went on to say, we're not just being philanthropists. We don't want to just hand this out. We just want to make our system more like 1966, basically. And I was on to her. She, I guess, got 57 other people to sign this thing for Biden, who saw it evidently, this letter, tax the millionaires. And she's now 1,000 strong with some British sign-ons. I'm waiting for a bill, she said she's putting forward with her group within the next 2 months. Just want people to watch for that. And the second thing is also just a point. I find that some people who are so wealthy, they don't get out much. They live in a bubble. If we could get them out of their bubble or just put the pins in that bubble, I wonder if it would make a difference. could we hijack them and have them live in the streets for a little bit?
Hey, why don't we give Harris a chance to
Thank you.
respond? Thanks.
Well, I would just say, I mean, everything you said, of course, before, our progressive income tax is still overall progressive, but it is not what it was. It's been eviscerated many times by Republican administrations and not increased enough by Democratic ones. So you're right that we could do a much better job than like we used to do. Would be a big step forward. But I will say this about the point about the bubble. When I was a kid, the doctor and the milkman lived on the same street. Okay, they don't anymore. They aren't milkmen anymore. The equivalent. They don't live on the same street.
Thanks, Eileen. Thanks, Harris. Luis, you have the floor next.
Is that okay?
You should hear you, yeah.
What I was thinking about, and one of the things I work on a lot, and with some success and some not, is the whole problem of getting through to people about the danger, the imminent, urgent danger of nuclear war. Like, you know, right now, Pakistan and India were, and in many ways still are, still really close to a war. And it would be, the result would be nuclear winter. Oftentimes in my work, people, when they hear nuclear weapons, I mean, it's just sort of a blank. They just kind of shut off. You know, sometimes it's referred to as psychic numbing or something like that. Have you got any suggestions on how we can circumvent or get around that? Because I mean, people really have to. I guess the term would be wake up, but do what is possible. And there are lots of things that we could do to get out of this mess.
Well, yeah, I do think, can you hear me okay? This is a little bit.
See, the cord's getting
Yeah.
scratchy. Yeah.
I mean, we all live in bubbles too. That was sort of the point of the convergence, right? Was to get out of our bubbles. And of course, we didn't really do that 10 years ago when we tried. And I think that was a good thing. But, you know, to talk about the nuclear stuff, I mean, we all understand it, but in most venues, it isn't even discussed. Yeah. And so, I mean, to take the venue I work in, you know, at SEIU, we should be, I mean, as a direct care union, we should be absolutely clear that we are against militarism and for peace and for the end of the threat of nuclear annihilation. And yet we do not discuss it. And I gave a webinar, I don't know if any of you saw it for MAPA, but one of my points was, interestingly, when the Democrats are in power, we do not criticize them at all, okay? And so to the extent they are for militarism, we give them a pass. So then when the Republicans come in, we can criticize around the edges, you know, and say, well, we don't like what Trump is doing here or what George Bush did with the war on terror. But we can't go, you know, again, we're hypocritical when we talk about the big picture because we have supported the big picture of militarism by our silence. And we have to change it.
Yeah.
That's why we need this convergence. And I would say for my union, particularly around direct care, every dollar for nuclear weapons, everything is it blow against direct care. And direct care is about taking care of people, not annihilating them.
Yeah, if that cord keeps giving you trouble, just pop it in the stand and then it won't move at all. Sorry about that. Mary, I think, was next in line. And I see you.
Hi, everybody. So I'm listening to you. I'm listening, and I'm saying, yes, that is what it's about. It's about convergence. So I just came back from Cuba last week after 5 months because I lived there half the year. And one of the reasons I lived there half the year, probably the reason, is because Cuba's poor, it's embargoed, it's slipping into more and more inequality. But the bedrock of the society is the idea of convergence. In fact, it's written into the Constitution. And everybody speculates about why the United States is so against Cuba, but it's quite simple. Cuba is trying to fulfill that 1789 promise. It's the bedrock of the society. And I met a young woman there who'd been there 3 days. She's half Australian, half Italian and was raised in Kenya. And after 3 days there, she said, "Oh, what's so wonderful about Cuba is the social contract is intact." And that's really what we've lost. We've lost our social contract. And we keep fighting to get it back, but in many ways, I think we're fighting windmills. You know, we don't get down to the basics sometimes. But the caring society, I just want to mention this, the caring society is not underpaid home health care workers. The caring society is an extraordinary health system that I've just been in the clutches of, where I saw a geriatrician in 2 days who sent me to a dermatologist, an audiologist, and the traditional medicine to get acupuncture, and I had addressed over a period of 3 weeks sciatica, shingles, sleep problems, and a couple of other things. And the only thing I presented was my ID so they know where I live. That's a caring society. And it's not beyond our dreams. We have fun healthcare, not warfare. And we cannot emphasize that enough because everything comes into that. Everything. The nuclear threat, the fight against workers, the fight on women, everything comes into that. And the reason I belong to MAPA is that MAPA seeks to address all of these things. MAPA believes in convergence. That's why we're all here today. Am I right?
Oh, yes. No, thank you. And one thing that reminded me to say that when Biden came in with Build Back Better to do that incredible investment in direct care, that was the opportunity to heal this nation because red states and Republican voters need that care as much or more than most people. They work in those fields as much or more than most people. And that would have been sent the message that we are on your side, you know, and that would have gone a long way to creating a better ideological atmosphere than the one we inherited last November 5th.
Thank you. So, given the balance of power problem we have in Congress, how do we expand and secure Medicaid, move it towards universal health care, and as a separate issue, also greatly decrease militarism and the expenditures for militarism?
Well, the first
Sorry,
part,
I have a question.
no, the first part's easy. The second part's harder. The first part's easy because we're fighting that fight and we're winning it, I believe, in the Congress because they have a majority of only 4 members. And they are having a big problem. I don't know if you saw in the press today, you know, in the last couple of days. They're having a big problem holding 2 groups. The moderates who know that they will lose their seats if they vote to eviscerate Medicaid or Medicare or anything like that. And the rock solid right wingers who say if you do this tax cutting for the rich just by raising the deficit, you don't have our support. We care more about not raising the deficit. So they're caught between a bit of a rock and a hard place. And we are pouring calls in, even from here in Massachusetts. We're doing 50,000 calls to target districts to get voters in those districts calling their Republican members of Congress about how they feel about this. So that I feel we're fighting that fight. That's an example of why the Caring Society is actually a winning campaign. The problem will be bringing in the other 2 issues solidly into it. It's still too new an idea, I think, for too many people to realize that the budget, the federal budget, comes down to that simple a divide. The millionaire tax on millionaires, like on the 3 M's. You tax the millionaires, and we can tax them more, as it's been said, but we tax them, and then that's for justice. But then how do we divide that money between the other 2 M's, Medicaid and the military? And until people like people in my union and people across the country who need care can see that that's the sacrifice being made, That's what we have to do. That's an intrinsic though, not an extra, like you help us, we'll help you. No, this is, we're all in this together. We have to make that message stick, just like we do also with the environment. If we're going to solve the environmental crisis, we have to change our economy. It has to be a caring society economy, not an energy economy right now.
Yeah, thanks. I see your hands. I just want to make one brief comment to reinforce that because I just looked this up and I'll ask the crowd. As our president just recently said, we're approaching now $1 trillion military budget. It's well over $900 billion per year. Let me take some guesses. How much do you think the U.S. government spends in terms of research towards the National Institutes of Health towards curing cancer every year? How much does the U.S. government spend your tax dollars towards curing cancer?
Before or after dark?
Let's take a rough guess. Chris.
Okay.
400K, 400,000? It's more than that. It is more than 400K. It's $8 billion.
Yep.
It is less than 1% of what we spend on the military is what we spend to try and cure cancer. How many people in the room have either had cancer, lost someone to cancer, or know someone who's battled it?
My mom.
Republicans, Democrats, independents, socialists, communists, right-wing radicals, we all know somebody. And our government is spending less than 1% of what it spends on the military.
We have to convince Trump that cancer is another Greenland that we need to conquer.
Yeah. It could be tried. Next, I see Tim.
Thank you very much for a very succinct account of what needs to be done. On the how can be done side, I'd like to bring up something that I don't see brought up in the audience very often, and that is what is the main legal tool or weapon, perhaps one could also say the tip of the legal spear that the oligarchs wield against us in order to prevent the verification for what needs to be done from happening and indeed cause the backslide you mentioned ever since 1967. That turns out to be very easy to summarize. It's called corporate constitutional rights, wherein the Supreme Court has numerous times, starting in 1886, with Santa Clara versus Southern Pacific Railway, been decreed that in fact corporations are not just people as a legal fiction, but actually they are entitled to the same constitutional rights. And we are just have been formalized in multiple Supreme Court decisions over the years, including the 4th, 5th Amendment, 14th Amendment, and not yet the 2nd Amendment, but I guess that's probably just a matter of time in the way things are going. The main place, I can't go into all this now, it would take too long, but I will tell everybody that you probably need to pay a visit to an organization I support called MoveToAmend.org, which is pushing for a constitutional amendment, has been for over 10 years now, to say that corporations are not equal to the constitutional rights, and that money is not speech. And I think getting that amendment passed, which is really a very hard thing, would do more to set the trends that we've seen over our lifetimes back and start getting us back towards 1966 and anything else. Signature, I know, say possibly ranked choice voting at the national level, which is also a constitutional amendment, but I don't know anybody's even thinking about doing that. Thank you.
Well, actually, there's a movement to do ranked choice voting in Massachusetts.
So
Right now.
Massachusetts, yeah.
Yeah, no, not national. Well, I would just push back a little bit this way. I mean, I totally respect what they're working on. It could be the linchpin, but you know, I always tell people when they say, "Oh, you're the legal counsel of SEIU," I say, "No, I work for the state council of SEIU. I'm not a lawyer," but so I don't have a very legal mind. I don't think, because I think of what the two things I think have really caused the backsliding is the attack on the two things that redistribute wealth in this country: progressive taxation and union collective bargaining. Those have been targets since the 60s of incredible pushback, and we've gone from 35% of the workforce being unionized to under 10%. And most of those tax-funded workers, not in the private sector anymore. And on top of that, the actual, effective tax rate has gone down from 60% to about 25% for the top billionaires in this country. So those two things explain a lot of that, but you may be right that the legal underpinnings may be as important or more important. I can't say for sure.
All right, we're gonna start thinking about winding down, but I see your hands. Maybe everybody who's raised their hand will get a chance, but keep it short if you can, so we can get to everyone and get on with our business. Gary.
Thank you, but I want to thank
SEIU.
Yes, I want to thank SEIU for unionizing graduate students and part-time workers at universities. And I'm wondering to what extent that has drawn the ire of the Trump administration. But separately, there is an attack of universities underway now. It's very serious, and it's already causing reductions in admitting graduate students. Scientific research is on hold in many places and being cut. Very dangerous. If people can't get educated, then they lose.
Well, I think it's right that fascists always attack higher education and unions about equally viciously and try to turn them, the first into an instrument of propaganda, and the second into a fake kind of unionization where the boss is really called to. I do think that, I was an adjunct lecturer for years. And when we organized 5,000 adjunct professors here in Boston, somebody said, "Oh, that's great." I said, "Well, I'm just getting revenge on every bad job I ever had."
All right, I do see your hands. I'm just giving it to Tim. You've had your hand up for a while.
When I was involved with Veterans for Peace, I think it was the Tea Party that started talking about reducing military spending. And I kept going to Veterans for Peace or my chapter and saying, "Can we do anything with that?" And eventually I got a hard no. And it was from one of our leadership, and his son, or adopted son, was gay. And he said, "I don't want to have anything to do with those homophobes." And I don't know what the answer is, and I don't look forward to interacting with those folks. But if they're talking about reducing military spending and it's like a non-starter to interact with them, I'm not sure how we're going to make any progress.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, first of all, I think we have to recognize, and Paul Shannon has recognized this a lot, that there are divisions that run in them. And I watched some interviews, like the New York Times interview with Steve Bannon, no hero of mine, and yet he said, "I would rather Trump cut the military budget and raise taxes on the rich in order to justify what he wants to do." And I was like, well, so far I'm with you, we got into immigration, it's the opposite, right, the bigotry is there. But we need to divide that, we need to put a wedge in that. And I know that because, when you represent workers, the workers in our shops, they aren't necessarily all the same ideologically. So we deal with people of many different ideological stripes. The kind of work you do matters. I mean, our prison guard, social workers are our most conservative members because of the kind of work they do. But I can talk to them, and I can talk to them exactly the way you're saying. You got to get through to what are your interests? What kind of society do you want? What kind of power do you want as a worker? We have to be together. So, you're right on the money. I mean, I think we don't pay nearly enough.
I was struck by when you described the caring society and the workers who are doing the care, it's mostly women.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if we're missing something here.
terms of our organizing, in terms of our strengthening our movements, by not really letting women lead and reaching out to those groups that are seeking to empower women. Not just how we're trying to empower our workers for all the other aspects of peace that we're working towards. I think there's something missing when you're telling us that that's where the caring society emanates from, but we're not letting them take the lead with this. What do you think?
Well, I mean, in my union, women are leaders. I mean, our national president, 2 million members, is an African American woman, April Barrett. Okay, and many of our leaders at the local level, presidents and so on, are elected women leaders, often again African American or Latina. And I think you're right. It's very important. The labor movement has been slow to evolve that way. But one of the things that speeds it up is when you change who the workforce is we represent. And that becomes a necessity. The same way that civil rights became a necessity after economic equality for white people had improved so much. Suddenly people could see the injustice of it. And a majority could see it for the first time. And Jim Crow was done at that point, although God knows it's coming back. So it's a constant struggle, but I mean, you're right. The leadership lags behind the reality, but the reality has to prove that the leadership should come from the people who are being effective. So, thank you.
Yes, thank you for the presentation and the analysis of your society. I wanted to ask you, this might not be directly related to the 3 points that you made, but it appears to me, and I don't have a lot of facts on this, that many of the service provider organizations are now private organizations made to make profit. They're taking, you can see this in the mental health community, you can see it in some of the direct care communities, and then some of the organizations, like the large ones, hospitals, are being taken over by private equity businesses. So can you talk a little bit about the challenges of organizing people in for-profit healthcare, community care, social work, in some way?
Well, privatization of direct care has been a major push by, and this is child care as well as the various healthcare things that we've been mentioning. There's been a big push for decades now. It's part of the attack on the democratic revolution. And it's to, basically lower the standards of those workers. Because it's interesting, when I said we represent 80,000 direct care workers, I could have said your private sector direct care workers, because we also represent, more than 10,000 public sector direct care workers who earn a middle class salary. Okay, they do the same work, but they're paid enough to live. And so whenever they privatize, they're creating a situation where the same work is being done by people paid half as much and with way less benefits. So to take an example, when the governor, I'm a big fan of our governor, I'm sorry to say, our governor said in January, we've got a big problem here. I think we have a shortfall. She chose to cut public sector mental health caseworkers. 50% of them, 170 of our members, cut them, laid them off to save money. These are people who do teen suicide watch and things like that. But they also do it at a living wage. And what does that mean? We say, what do you mean by that? What's going to happen? They say, well, those private agencies can pick up the slack and pay people $20 an hour to do it. So this fight is right, it's part of the fight for justice, is to make sure these people have, as I mentioned, they have good jobs. And that means they're either in the public sector, covered by public sector contract, or they're in the private sector covered by a union contract, and that's a long fight. I mean, when I said we got them up to $21 an hour, that was a big fight. They're still not that far ahead of the private sector people because the pushback from these private profit-seeking people is very intense. So we have to keep fighting that fight too. That's why the unions are one of the main ways of redistributing wealth when they succeed. So thanks for that point. It's a very important one.
So, hi Harris. I just wanted to bring up a couple of things,
Yeah.
from my personal experience last, let's say, few weeks. It seems to me that one of our greatest challenges, is
Oh,
to
man, you're
cultivate
coming into my
class
territory now.
consciousness.
You're invading my territory.
Recently, I was talking to a friend, really nice guy, he does well, you know, comfortable, middle class, he's a financial advisor. And he was explaining to me, although I think he has voted Democrat in the past, he's for the tax cuts to the wealthy. And why? He says, my clients.
Now you have to make up to everybody by.
They work really hard. And some of them are waitresses and they need those, you know, there's tips not to be taxed and their overtime not to be taxed. You know, how we're so atomized that everyone is focused in.
How's your writing? That
their
was asked.
little area. So
where do you stand?
I'm not, it's a big question to ask, but how, I think it's incredibly important to raise class consciousness in our work for peace. And do you have any wisdom to share?
Well, I think that the best moment in my political life was when we had that slogan that Occupy handed us.
Congratulations.
99%.
What's the title of the
1%.
quote?
We accomplished more with that slogan than anything I've seen in my life. Here in Massachusetts, we ran that slogan. We want to double the minimum wage. We created a Scandinavian level paid family and medical leave program in Massachusetts. We created the first progressive income tax on people making over $1 million a year in 115 years of a constitutional ban on it. Okay, that all happened under that slogan. So I would say when you say class consciousness, I know what you mean. I mean, in the workplace, that can mean many different things, depending what group of people you're talking about. But I do think we all need a class consciousness that is, has to say, the Dios top.
She knew. She did it because,
I love it. Lots of hands, you know, we're gonna start winding down, so I won't cut the time even in half. I hate to do it.
This is a mystery.
For your questions, and we may take them in lightning round fashion. But while I didn't just ask me, what's a good question. According to you, what do you think is a living wage per hour these days in Massachusetts?
When I say those public sector work, we're talking about $50 an hour, basically. And you need health coverage. You need a pension for when you retire. You need paid time off. I mean, that's not asking a lot in a state that if Massachusetts were a nation, it would be the fourth richest nation per capita in the world.
Common situation.
Switzerland, Norway, and Qatar.
No,
but so we have no excuse
common in the sense
that we
of
pay people so little.
People,
the fact that we are so rich makes it much harder
and worrying about getting caught and wondering what they'll do when they do get caught and what will she do, what will I do? No. The angst is
the social forces of the United States create a situation in which these three different areas, peace, justice, and environment, come together more than they have in the past. But I think we'll agree that we are not making the most use of that convergence. So I'd like you to ask you what you think are the main.
That's good. So where does it go now? Does it start the circulators?
And also, I'd like to mention, you just mentioned it, but it's not like we've lost everything on the progressive taxation. I think it would be important to tell people just how much money has been raised by the new progressive tax in Massachusetts.
Right. Well, no, that is really, it's a story that just keeps coming and coming and coming, which is that we have raised almost $3 billion a year in new revenue that is being used for education and transportation. It's an incredible victory. We were warned that the other side said millionaires will all leave the state because they won't want to pay it, and so that money will start to go down. It's been going up, and the study of movement is that we actually have 20% more millionaires now than when we passed the millionaires tax. So that completely is fun. But anyway, so you were saying, what's the main obstacles? I think the main obstacles are the labor movement not recognizing the military budget as a crucial part of its program. That's something that needs to be addressed. I think that militarism has been too baked into the labor movement because of the guns and butter years of the Cold War. We should be past that now because of who the workforce is. I know Jeff's had tons of experience. He could probably write a better book than I could have. But it is a very big and difficult task. I feel less than Jeff does that we have not done our part. I feel we have tried to do our part. We do have solidarity. We have solidarity with Mesa Oster. I mean, people in the union movement know that mass police action is solidarity. But still, when I get up at the AFL-CIO and I make a talk, something like what I did here, I get pulled aside by the leadership, very progressive leadership, and they say, please don't mention the military. We have numbers of living to depend on that. And so the other is the environmental movement. I don't think the environmental movement understands that the importance of changing the economy, not just being what we do. I mean, the core of capitalism is replacing labor with automation. That means replacing human labor with thermal energy. There's no form of thermal energy that doesn't threaten our environment. Okay? Unless we get past this idea that has to keep growing the rate of return for people in those industries, we will never save this ecosystem.
Hi, thanks, Harris. I've got lots of questions, but I think most of them will go after this period when we can just talk as we talk about the importance of recognizing class in our understanding. We also have to understand racial implications and wondering how we do that. So both at this point, racial understandings and the needs of young people that are suffering.
Well, I mean, first of all, I am a big believer you have to separate those two questions out. We treat, when we say race, class, and gender, we treat them like they're all three the same thing. Gender and race are an identity, and that's a very important thing, and it has led to very great injustices, right? And it has to be confronted. Class is a structural position in the socioeconomic system. People who don't have class consciousnness, as was mentioned, are in the working class, whether they know it or not. And vice versa, people who have class consciousness might be rich. I mean, meaning class solidarity with workers or poor people. That's such a different thing that I don't think it pays to lump them together as three identities we have to deal with as identities. We have to treat them as separate problems of organization, separate problems of theory, you could say, of like what society is. That's my position. Not everybody agrees with that, but I feel very strongly about that it's sort of a mistake to lump them together. Because you can talk about class in a way that is incorporating the racial and gender aspects, like I did in the talk, maybe not adequately, but I mean, mentioning the women in Paris or the slave uprising in Haiti, or today that the workers in my union are predominantly women or people of color, right? Those are not insignificant things. Those are highly significant things. And if they weren't happening, the democratic revolution would be a failure, right? But I'll leave it there because you could get into quite a complicated thing from that. But I appreciate the question very much.
And I'll just say as a plus one to that, before I got into the advocacy and organizing work, I was not in your union, but I was a service employee. I was doing home care for older folks to try and keep them in their houses as long as possible and out of nursing homes and assisted living. And you are absolutely right. Who's doing that work? People of color, women, and immigrant communities.
And young people like you.
And young people as well. But predominantly people of color are taking care of our elders. Jeff?
Thanks, Harris. When you talked about 1789, it reminded me of the issue of that's an obstacle to us in our organizing of the idea who defines what patriotism is. And in 1789, as we all know, the children of the nation were the people and not the rulers. And we need to redefine that. We need to take it back. The idea that the 99%, the citizens, they're the real patriots, and that the ruling elites could care less about the country as a whole. And of course, we need to win that battle because, you know, they own, the 1% owns the idea of patriotism and uses it against us. And we need to turn that around. I think it's a real obstacle to our work.
People knew better way back in the 20s when Little Orphan Annie, the comic strip that was in the, you know, an early comic strip, Daddy Warbucks, right? Daddy Warbucks made his money profiteering off of World War I. I mean, that's a consciousness you just don't see much anymore. Whatever it meant at the time, it certainly meant it was a nod to people who were, you know, cynical and skeptical of the wealthy as patriots.
Oh, I'll do you one better. When's the last time you saw What a Wonderful Life? Watch that movie again and see how much we've lost since that FDR politics. John McDougall.
Thank you so much, Harris. It's been fantastic. A quick plug and a question. One is there's a book some of us in the Peace and Climate group have been reading called Less is More by Jason Full, which I think you may know.
Yes.
And I think it's really good. Those are a broad overview and in a way a summary of the carrying economy. The question is following up on what we just heard from various people. What would you suggest about 1 to 3 kind of key strategic ways we can delegitimize the military, maybe going beyond your discussion of what happens within the labor movement, but broadly people who are not active on labor issues. So any suggestions about that would be versatile.
Well, I think it would certainly help if people understood the federal budget the way I described. And that's really the key thing. Jonathan's been working on that diligently. Many of us have been working on that for years. We need to find ways to communicate that. It doesn't help when our, you know, supposed leaders like Joe Biden don't follow through on that stuff. They don't make that explicit. I mean, when Kamala Harris said we need the most lethal military in the world, I was like, even Ronald Reagan would have said the most lethal military in the world. I mean, what is going on here? Am I some kind of nightmares? And you know, and of course, you know, Trump, I won't even go there. It's craziest, but that's the point. We aren't able to put that out there as a leading motif the way we should have, the way we hoped it would be after the Cold War ended. We thought, okay, now we're going to get jobs with peace. Now we're going to get the peacetime dividend. No, so we have that as unfinished business. The labor movement has an outsized piece of that, I think. But I think, and I think the environmental movement has to do a better job too of linking peace to the environment, because that's another thing, right? I mean, once this Cold War, this new Cold War started, the environment was kicked to the curb. You know, we started to say we're the biggest natural gas producers in the world now. That's terrible setback. So yes, I think we all have work to do, but I do think that's really, that has to be the crux of it, because you don't want that money going to, and then of course the point about Daddy Warbucks again, who's gains from that ultimately? Not patriotism, but profiteers. Patriotism, you know, I've met, you know, veterans, combat veterans who have the same attitudes about this we do. We're not in Veterans for Peace. People I would never, people voted for Trump in my union who agree that this money is wasted on wars we shouldn't be fighting and to enrich people who don't care about our lives.
So, Joseph Harris, of course, a great speech as always, good thinking behind it. One point, and then a question for which I don't think any of us have the answer. So I want to just raise a question about patriotism in terms of how that builds tribalism and how it reinforces the idea of U.S. exceptionalism and its right role to dominate the world. To appreciate somehow we need to build an internationalism within that. I was at a conference the last couple of days at Brown, which focused on diffusing tensions with China. And the people there, which range from people who feel very comfortable here, academics, some former military people, and some right-wing people with whom I have almost nothing in common. But what I found was folks on the right were quoting statistics about vast majorities of U.S. people who don't want war. And talking about a number of figures on the right who would be very happy to send more immigrants, more people of color, more of us to Guantanamo, but who want to prevent war. And as we try to build the kind of movement that we need, part of the question I have, and I blew up at the end of that meeting in terms of Gestapo-like tactics that are going on now. I couldn't take that rhetoric. But my question is, how do we find ways to work with them in some ways, and obviously opposed to them for most of our work now as we try to protect something like constitutional democracy?
Well, you're right, it's a hard thing, but I will say that we have to separate these, the working class base of Steve Bannon, which can be very bigoted, from the plutocrat base of Elon Musk. That's the dividing line we have to play for. We're not going to win all those people, right? They're always foot soldiers for, fascism out there. But you're going to win back a surprising number of them. I mean, I have a little vignette I wrote up for the Stansbury Forum. This is for a left labor forum on meeting a guy in Utah who was an ultra right-wing militia type combat veteran from Iraq and Afghanistan, reeling against Obama at the time. It was 2016, going to vote for Trump, blah, blah, blah. Once we got it solidly, first of all, we understood the same thing about those wars. We both resented those wars. I respected it. Sir, I even called him soldier at one point. He really appreciated that I called him that because he feels marginalized, working minimum wage jobs at 30. And then I said I work for a labor union. He said, God, I wish I had a union job. And from then on, it was my father worked for the railroads here. We had a good, we had a great life. We owned our home. It was like I was talking to a different person. We have to find those. We have to be able to break those things up the way they needed to be broken up in Germany, 1933. A lot of good people in Germany in 1933. Why did they lose? Somehow the blocks formed to their disadvantage. We have to make sure that doesn't happen. I agree. It's a very difficult thing because you sometimes have to swallow your gall. I heard terrible things out of that guy's mouth before we got to the good stuff.
All right, I see you, Steve, and then I think we're gonna move on. This has been a fantastic discussion. Thanks for everyone who has been participating so far. Steve?
So I don't know how to focus our efforts. For example, with India, Pakistan, they fight a nuclear war that threatens our physical survival, all of us. On the other hand, if we spend all of our energy on India, Pakistan, we're not talking about preventing nuclear war. We're wasting our efforts for all of these other social activities. So how do you make that decision? And can we? I'm not sure you can say you do both or split it down the middle or something.
Well, you're harking back to what I call the chicken and egg conundrum of Gorbachev's speech, where he kind of said, maybe we need to put this on the back burner while we deal with that. I think the answer has to come around strategy, and strategy means what I call the left wing of the possible. So there's a question of where can you have an impact? There are things we cannot impact, even though we should. In other words, who's going to impact the decisions of India and Pakistan? Well, if we had political forces in America who would intervene and speak for us there, then we would want to work on them to speak to them. We're not in a good position on that right now. We haven't been for a while, even under Biden. There wasn't a willingness to negotiate peace at the highest levels. And that's why, in some ways, I'm saying we almost do have to take a step back and fight for peace as what we have control over. We have control over defeating this attack on Medicaid. That would really set them back. Still a ways to go then to win the midterms, maybe get some decent people in who actually do represent us, like happened toward the end of the Vietnam War, that started actually electing peace candidates in this country. And then they become our emissaries to India and Pakistan. I can't be an emissary to India and Pakistan, even if my life is at stake over it. So I guess the question is, how do we strategize to not miss opportunities that maybe I'm missing right now, right? But also not tilted windmills, so to speak, do what we can win so that we can win bigger things next time. It's sad because all our lives we've lived under this threat in one form or another. And thank God we're still alive. But the hands are approaching midnight on the doomsday clock. So we need to work fast to build the power we need to affect things like that.
Thank you. Thank you, Harris Rubin. You could have stayed up there for a curtain call if you wanted. Come on, one story. I will embarrass you. The fact that we have the political leader of one of the most important unions in Massachusetts is not something that we should just gloss over. So thank you so much for spending so much time with us.
Been a haven to have a peace movement.
Now, one of the things that I like best about Massachusetts Peace Action is how we run things. We are extremely democratic. What we just did is in the style of an old New England town hall, right? Where everyone gets their say, because this is supposed to be America, right? And look, it's important to us that we live those values. We don't just talk about them, we give people a chance to participate, to vote. And I want to remind people that that's not just today. Just like I always say this about elections, politics is not about what you do once every 2 years or 4 years, but also about what you do every day in between. And that's true in Mass Peace Action too. But right now we do want to have an election because everyone who donates even a small amount of money to Massachusetts Peace Action gets a say. Come to our annual meeting and you elect our leaders. So I want to turn the mic over to the co-chair of our board of directors, Rosemary Keene, who is going to run our board election.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, so we're talking about democracy and now we will do it. We have a pretty large board, 22, 23 people. And so today we have 3 new candidates for the board. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us who are re-upping to serve another 2 years. So that's what our vote will be on. It's 9 people. And those of us who are in the group that have been serving and want to continue to serve, that includes Mary Ellen Perkulos. Mary Ellen is here. Could you stand if you're here when I say your name? Mary Ellen is standing at the back. Yes. That'd be great if you don't mind. Claire Schaefer Duffy, I don't think is here. Is Claire here? Claire Schaefer Duffy lives in Worcester.
I live in Worcester.
Oh, okay, you're here. Good.
Central Massachusetts.
Yes, Central Mass is here.
Yeah.
Jeff Klein. Upping. Rosalie Anders. Rosalie here? No, not today. Susan Murphy is upping. And Rosemary Key is re-upping. So now let's introduce our nominees, our new people who are interested in serving. We had a wonderful committee, board recruitment committee this year, and that was Hayat Imam, Susan Murphy, and Brian. So these 3 people were in touch with possible candidates, talked it over with them, and these 3 folks agreed to serve on the board. The first one is Jill El Ashkar, who is not here, I don't believe, couldn't be with us today. But Jill is a member of North Shore for Palestine and a co-recipient of MAPA's Peace Leadership Award for her role in organizing the community encampment project. So very, very important work that Jill has been a part of. We're very pleased that she's willing to join the board. The second person is Evan Mackay.
the former president of the Harvard Grad Students Union, a pro-democracy organizer, a Harvard teaching fellow, and Evan was a candidate for the state legislature. And Evan has also agreed to step up and join us on the board. The third person is Grace Sanford, who is a student at Northeastern. Grace, are you still here? Grace is a student at Northeastern and has been a MAPA intern. She was a legislative co-op with MAPA in 2024. She has served as a spokesperson, an organizer, an author, and an advocate during her time with us. And we so appreciate all the work that Grace has done. So
I think we want to invite Grace to say a few words if you prefer the stand or the wireless.
Wireless.
There you go.
I would like to start off by saying I'm one of the ones who was not alive in 1966. Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Grace Sanford. That's right. I am a rising senior, hard to believe, at Northeastern University studying political science. And I was a Northeastern co-op with MAPA for 6 months this time last year. It's only a year ago, last year. When I was thinking of what I wanted to say while I had the floor today up here, I was thinking of my first interview with Brian when I was interviewing for this position. And he asked me a very simple question that you get in all interviews, that I'm sure all of us have had. Why do you want this position? Why do you want to work with MAPA? And I had a little bit of a complicated answer. Sorry, Brian. But it's because I grew up feeling helpless, like I'm sure many of us have. Wanting to do something, wanting to take action on so many different issues, peace issues, whether it be Palestine, whether it be climate, whether it be nuclear disarmament, but not having an avenue to do that. Can you still hear me? Beautiful. Yeah. But not having an avenue to do that. And I wanted to get rid of that helplessness. And I thought MAPA was a great avenue to be able to do that. And it did. Thankfully, Brian gave me the job. Brian. And yes. And I was able to do so many amazing things at MAPA. They give co-ops such a great who work at MAPA and the volunteers who had the confidence in me to do all these things that I didn't have in myself at the start of my co-op. So if confirmed to be on the MAPA board, really my hope is I can give back to this organization as much as you've given to me. So thank you so much.
One thing. Oh, yes, maybe. What do I say? I've been working with MAPA for years, actually knew a lot of these folks before I was in MAPA, and the reason I ended up being in MAPA, I live in Fall River, by the way, it's a little drive, and the whole reason I ended up working with people around Cambridge and Boston is because I kept moving to groups and getting disillusioned. So finally I ended up with all you guys, and I found, you know, a place where I feel people are very serious and nice, and yeah, it's a great community. So that's all I have to say.
How long?
Thank you. When I was a union president, you used to worry when I was in front of a microphone, but not now. I just want to say I'm happy to find in MAPA people who share my beliefs and political interests, and it's a kind of a home for me that I'm very glad to have.
With nuclear disarmament in high school, before MAPA was born. But have been so happy to work with MAPA because it feels like a group of shared humanity, people with different interests who bring different kinds of energy and ideas, and good food.
So, yes, so did you say anything else about Jill?
Yeah, that's a great idea, Sonny.
Could I say?
Yeah, you too,
Go
you
ahead.
too, yeah.
I'm Sunny Robinson. I live up on the North Shore. And I could say many more absolutely fabulous, wonderful things about who Jill Ashkar is than any of us have the time to listen today. Jill is a North American, born and raised in Salem, married to a Palestinian for 35 years, have two absolutely fabulous daughters who are now probably more Palestinian than they are North American, has traveled with her husband to Gaza many, many times because her husband is from Gaza. They've lost many family members, and despite it all, Jill has absolutely been a major, if not the major developing building force on the North Shore, working for a more appropriate, humane response from the US in relation to Israel and Palestine. She has worked back and forth, building incredible bridges between the Palestinian community, the Middle Eastern community, and the MAPA community. So Jill is just absolutely the top of the list of the most fabulous new people I've met through MAPA over the last couple of years. Thank you for the opportunity to say good things. Thank you. That put it in the picture a lot. Yeah. Okay, so
I just have to sing some praise for Evan as well, who is not with us because he's at something else. He's with Elizabeth Baldwin at the Democratic, at the Cambridge Dems, getting the issue of starvation in Gaza before their eyes, making them confront that, as Evan often is. He's a union leader, as you heard, and one of the reasons why we just had to have him on the board is he keeps showing up at things. And I see Evan at everything. And it's his dedication. And he ran to be part of the state legislature, either right here in this district or like 50 yards over the line. We're close to the line, but to represent this part of Cambridge, and only missed against a longtime incumbent by 40 votes.
Wow.
Right? Now, I know that's I immediately saw the silver lining. I was like, let's grab it. Because he's such a leader, he's going far. And the more time that he can spend with us, I think it's going to benefit Massachusetts section so much. And then
add something, he's such a positive human being. And in these times where it's so hard to be positive, he's wonderful to have around, and he's very talented as well.
Yeah, and I'll just give one more example in brief. Heard some criticism about our governor. I share it. One of the things that we're doing, and you're going to hear more about it in just a little bit, is we're mobilizing people to be more confrontational, reasonable, but confrontational at certain opportunities, right? So just yesterday, Governor Healy was taking public questions at the public library. And also by phone, also by text. And we wanted to ask mainly about the threat to due process, right? The case of Miss Ozturk, who was abducted by ununiformed men about a mile from here in Somerville, right? In Massachusetts, which is the reason why due process is included in the Constitution. Because they demanded we must include the Bill of Rights or we're not coming in. And the fact that the governor has not said anything about Miss Ozturk until yesterday, the day she was released, is really quite a shame. So many of our members responded to the call. They called in. It worked. The interview was dominated by that question. And one of the folks who actually showed up in person to ask the question of the governor, and it surprised me not one bit, was Evan. And that's why I want Evan on the board. Sorry for going on so long, but I appreciate it.
So if there's no further discussion, we'll call the question and take a vote. Amber, thoughts? And I guess we want to do it as a group. Yeah. So we have seen the slate and heard the slate.
I move the adoption of the slate.
Thank you. Is there a second? I've heard seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Like a lot of ayes. And all those opposed? And are there any abstentions? Abstentions. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Rosie, Alice, so if you have anything else that you'd like to say as one of our leaders, co-chair of our board of directors?
You know what?
Please.
I'll just say that I'm so happy. I'm sitting here and enjoying all of your questions and the discussion and the presentation and looking around the room. It's a good feeling, especially when we're dealing with all of the terrible things we're dealing with right now. And we look forward to everybody getting even more involved and doing some more work this year.
I can add one other comment. In this environment where major employers, Tufts and Harvard, MIT, BU, Boston College, etc., Boston University, we used to view those environments as places where you could have the kind of freedom and discussion we have here. Now, I can tell you, having been in an MIT faculty meeting just 2 days ago, that is no longer the case, right? Because the enemies of free expression and democracy are now, within these environments. So peace action becomes particularly important because I think most people here feel they can say freely what they say, whereas that is getting to be a narrower and narrower environment. We have to value and continue to protect and acknowledge that.
Thank you. Thank you, and we didn't give you a proper introduction. It's Jonathan King, the other co-chair of our board. So next, we are going to get into a little bit of nuts and bolts because we feel you have the right to know. So we are going to get into our treasurer's report and our admin director's report, so you can hear about how we've done in terms of fundraising and our finances and exactly the health of the organization to which you belong. Next, I will bring up our treasurer, Mary Ellen Kirkolos. Round of applause. Also did a lot of work in terms of planning this event that you're currently at and bringing some of that delicious food and seltzer that you've been enjoying.
Yes, I would just tell so thanks, everybody, and really, I'm just gonna say a few words to introduce Cole, going to present the budgetary information. And I just wanna remind ourselves when Harris was talking about, a degrowth economy, because of course, this economy that is dependent on unlimited growth is, of course, unsustainable. On the other hand, MAPA is doing well and is growing. So that's the one corner of this crazy economy that we can be thankful for. So anyhow, so Cole is going to present a budget and show you that we are doing very well and we continue to grow. So yeah, take it away, Cole. He's not happy with this.
I can mess with it. Yeah, happy to do it in your direction.
Yeah, thanks. Just to share a little bit of our financial information, really just as transparency, so the members know how the money is being spent and how we're doing. Next slide, please. We actually have two organizations that collaborate. We have Massachusetts Peace Action. This is the annual meeting of Massachusetts Peace Action. It's a membership organization. We have about 2,400 members who provide financial support. And then we have Mass Peace Action Education Fund. That is a public charity. Officially, it's a organization such that you can donate to it and get a tax deduction, and the money can only be used for educational purposes. Actually, it's educational, charitable, and scientific, but in our case, it's educational. That means we can talk about the issues with that money. We can educate people. But we can't support or oppose candidates. We can do a little bit of lobbying, but we can't do the majority of our activity with the Ed Fund lobbying. But the MAPA can support and oppose candidates in the lobbying. So that's why we have two organizations that collaborate. The Ed Fund is governed by a small board, a self-perpetuating board that chooses its own successors, but the membership organization actually just see elections. Let's go. So we're going to look at those two together. Here's our 2024 results. I've been struggling. I've been accused of showing boring charts with like rows of numbers. So I'm trying to think of how to present this in a more interesting way. So this shows the 2024 in the 4 quarters, comparing income and expense. And you can see that they're running roughly even. And that's and this is MAPA and MAPA Ed Fund combined, and so you can see that the income is highest in Q4. There's a sort of a tradition in this country that people give their donations at the end of the year. Back in the day, you could get a tax deduction for giving to organizations like the Ed Fund. Trump changed that in 2017. Only the very rich can now actually get a tax deduction for contributions, unless they get like a large amount per year, but it's still the tradition. Next one.
One second, we're just making your volume.
Oh,
There you go. Louder.
Chris has a question.
Yeah.
That is a great question. I actually don't know the answer. It's big in the numbers. This is the same information in tabular form. On the top 2 lines is MAPA, the next 2 lines is the Ed Fund. And then that's right.
Yeah. Bottom's both.
It actually reversed. MAPA's numbers are smaller than those of the Ed Fund, so they're mislabeled. I don't know what.
But anyway.
I should debunk these slides before I show them. That's what I should do. But anyway, let's look at the lower right. You see the total of both and the total for the year. You can see our income and expenses were very close. And that's because, frankly, we can think of a lot of things to do for peace and justice. So as more money we can raise, we can think of useful ways to spend what that isn't really our biggest challenge. Next up.
This is some of the boring numbers. I'm gonna gloss quickly over this, but just to show that they're there. Next slide. So now we're going to go into a little more detail on the income side. This is our budget for 2025 for the Ed Fund. Most of the money comes from dues and donations of all different sizes. We're going to have a later chart that breaks that down more. We have a few grants. We have program meetings, donations that are directed for a particular political purpose, whether it's the Gaza campaign, the Ukraine campaign, etc. And then savings, we actually had a couple of, there have been years when we made a substantial surplus and didn't spend it all. So we're drawing that down and transferring it. We always put that in our budget. A lot of times we don't end up using it. So well, I'll show you later that we have accumulated some reserves, which is a good thing in the age of film. Next slide. This is the same for MAPA. Again, most of it is from donations and a larger amount of program work. For MAPA, the program work tends to be things like donations made in connection with an event. Some people threw $1 in the till when they came in here. This is a program event that we're at today. Also, we have any other events where there's either admission charge or donations accepted. That's income in connection with the program. Next. Looking over the years, you can see in general our donations have increased, and I'm also breaking it down here by the size of the donation. So the color bars indicate the purple at the top is donations of $5,000 or more, and then yellow is 1,000 or more, the gray is 250 or more, the orange is 50 or more, and the bottom sort of blue is $0 to $49. So one thing you can see here is that the purple has actually been increasing as a share of our income, where the others are also growing in general, but not as fast. So that reflects that, I think what it reflects is that our issues are accentuating, they're becoming more critical. There's a general awareness that we have problems with peace and security and justice. And we're beginning to get enough scale, enough visibility that those who are able to give substantial donations are beginning to notice us a little bit more. Right? It's a tentative conclusion, but I think we're seeing some of that. Next slide. Well, the other point I should have made about that previous chart is that in general, it's grown year by year. So actually, we were back at 143,000 in 2020. We're at 298,000. So it's actually doubled in 5 years. In most years, it was increased. There was just one time when it went down, and that's where that's. Next slide. So then, by donation side, comparing MAPA to MAPA Ed Fund, you can see that for MAPA, the typical donation size is actually in the 50 to 250 range. So these are the rank and file donors, people that don't have a lot of money, but they're willing to give what they have, a little bit of what they have. Whereas the orange are people who are giving to a higher level. And their typical donation size is higher. Again, they're hoping to get that tax deduction. Next up. This is actually the same chart, except it's not broken down by, sorry, sort of look at this. Let's just slide right by that. Now we're going into expenses. So now we got the money. How are we spending it? The largest share, the gray at the bottom, is payroll. We have 4 staff members. Actually, we have 5. Brian is our only full-time right now. I'm part-time. Ting, our communications director, is part-time, and Katrina, our fundraising specialist, is part-time. We also have a office manager who's sort of even more part-time. And then contract really refers to intern stipends, actually. There's a couple of other contract categories.
I almost think it's almost all interest stipends. And we have tried to increase those. We have been able to increase the stipends for interns compared to the time when we raised Sanford this year. We've actually been able to raise that. And I believe there's a new group of donors that has come together that's trying to especially raise money to compensate interns and increase the share of younger people. And then basics refers to sort of some of the bottom line things you have to run an organization: the rent, the phone, the website, the copier, and stuff like that. Fundraising events is a small slice, like direct expenses. Like we have an annual dinner when we buy the food and we have to pay the room, things that are sort of direct costs, because from an accounting point of view, we treat that separately. Program expenses, those are things that we're spending on one of the political campaigns directly. And then there's other slices are so small.
Yeah.
So that's basically our expense breakdown. Next slide. Within the basics, that one small slice, about a quarter, what we call basics. Somebody asked, what is that? So this breaks that down a little bit more. Outside printing, rent, bookkeeping, postage. And a lot of these expenses are shared between MAPA and MAPA Ed Fund. We have a single office, single staff that works for both. Next slide. So looking forward on the budget of 2025, it's actually based on the 2024 actual. So the pie slices look the same, but this is our official budget for 2025. Next slide. So the record shows the MAPA expense budget. It's almost the same size of the slices. And next slide. So just the first 4 months of 2025, just to show that it's already coming in faster than it did last year. So I don't know if you can see that, but the orange line for the first 4 months is above the blue line for 2024. So we've actually already come close to $150,000 income, where for the whole year last year it was $300,000. So in only 4 months, we've already brought in almost half as much as we did on the whole year last year. Wow. So that shows a reflection. I think it reflects both our credibility as an effective organization and also the general community's understanding that we're in a terrible crisis and it's really important to do this kind of work. Next slide. And then just where we are now in terms of reserves. We have a little bit of money in the bank. We also have something in Schwab that is an investment company. That money is invested in socially responsible investments, no weapons, no fossil fuels. And so we have 306,000 available. Our run rate per year is expected to be 331,000. So that means we have enough money to carry out our operations for 11 months if our income were to stop. Suppose the next Doge activity is to cut off MAPA Ed Funding's credit card processing, which has been done. That was done to Wikipedia. Not Wikipedia, what's it called? WikiLeaks. I think what, 2014 or something. Just couldn't get any more donations, right? This is definitely a possibility for an organization like ours. So that's why we're looking at the months of savings we have. So that is a combination of a couple of major gifts that we received over the years. Plus, we've been able to put some money aside a couple of times through successful years, including the US $50,000 last year into that. So that's it. That's what I've got. I'm happy to take any questions.
What would they do?
They cut off their ability to process credit cards. They couldn't receive credit card charges. A lot of our income comes from credit cards. If somebody gives us $5,000, they typically write a check. But if somebody gives us $50 or even $500, they usually do it with a credit card. So a substantial part of our income, and that percentage is slowly rising over the years.
It is. No, we don't, MAPA actually doesn't track blue. Many progressive organizations do. We don't. We use an organization called Every Action, which is also sort of in bed with the Democratic Party and a lot of, provides the software support for a lot of progressive organizations. And we in turn use a credit card processing service called Paragon. I don't even know what it is. It's like a thing.
Do you want to use the recorded one, and that way audience members can hear it? Yeah. Yeah.
No, I'm just saying there was a huge, the ACLU and several other organizations held a big webinar about a month ago saying, watch out, because Trump is coming after the nonprofit status of major nonprofit organizations, particularly those interested in things like immigration and climate. It's the two issues that they highlighted that day. But obviously, we know that they're coming after Palestine activists as well. Of course, they're coming after Harvard, and it's almost indiscriminate. And so it's not, and that was an extremely well-attended presentation. Their Zoom room had room for 5,000 people, and it overflowed immediately. So there were a lot of people for nonprofits that wanted to learn about that threat. And so, anyway,
I wonder if you have any idea how many volunteers you have, and how many of them may be putting in halftime, the equivalent of a halftime position, some a full-time position, because of the organization will support that MAPA provides. And if it might make sense to have some kind of slide or have what the equivalent amount of financial contribution that would be if any of us were actually getting paid something.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. We do have a lot of volunteers, incredibly dedicated ones. We have working groups and campaign groups where they gather together to plan their work and to support each other and to collaborate. I'm happily involved with the Gaza Israel Mideast Peace Campaign these days. We have a steering committee of 10. We have about 30 people who come every week. Actually, it's every 2 weeks now to discuss the latest developments and the latest campaigns. Yes, honestly, probably 4 or 5 years ago, Brian and I actually sat down and counted as many volunteers as we could think of. We made a list of them. There were about 100, a little over 100 at that time. I'm sure it's more now, but we actually haven't done that count.
I think
people who do something regularly for the organization, they've got to be closer to 200 than 100 now, I would think.
Yeah, I think it's almost doubled. And the way I describe it is, I almost look at us as picture concentric circles, right? It's a logarithmic scale is what it is. The amount of people that we can reach out to, we call them supporters, can ask them to do something. We have their contact as they provided it to us. It's about 20,000. Actually even more than that, but that's a nice round number. Right? Our dues paying members, about 2,000.
I'm saying 2,400 last time I counted.
Yeah. Round numbers to maintain the logarithmic scale. So about 10 times smaller than that, that's that group that you're talking about, Pat. Those are our people who show up to committees, who are activists. Those are 200 strong. It goes up and down, but those are people who actually plan the activities, drive the work forward.
Most of you are those people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then we organize people within our districts. Right? So you have any of us here who work in our districts and organize more people within our districts who are not NAPA members, and you don't see them, but they spread the NAPA work across the state and in some cases across the country.
It's part of the philosophy of grassroots organizing, that we can expand that work by making every member feel like they can make that contribution.
I noticed you have a Schwab, probably a fund with the ET. Do you make your own, create your own fund?
We have a company called Zevin Asset Management. It's downtown Boston. They claim to be the originators of the concept of socially responsible investing. They basically, seven, and there are actually seven.
CECIN.
And so we have invested our money with them. They basically will figure out which companies to put it in, you know, when the tariff crisis rattled the stock market, they pulled all the money out of stocks and put it into treasuries or something.
Bonds, yeah.
Yeah, so that, you know, they're very sophisticated people who know how to manage money, but they also avoid fossil fuels, weapons. We actually pulled our money out of Google, just distributed that at Google.
That's hard.
There is real collaboration.
Other questions for our admin director, Paul? All right, I mean, I guess the slides do the talking, which is, and, right, we're not only a bit radically democratic, but also transparent. That's important to us as well. And as you can see by the trends, I think the population of Massachusetts, but also people across the country and people internationally too, because we do so many online webinars that you can participate in from anywhere on the globe, just by turning on your computer, are recognizing the increasing importance of our work. And that's exactly why I joined Massachusetts Peace Action myself about 7 years back. So the trends are all going in the right direction. We're a very healthy organization, and that is going to present another good problem. Now, how are we going to figure out all the projects and great stuff to do? Because as Cole said, as a nonprofit, we're not in the business of storing money away. We want to find other things to spend it on. Increasing our intern stipends, for instance, is a great way to spend our money. Get young people more involved, recognize and compensate them for their work, which is incredibly important. So, if you have a great idea for a project that we should be taking on, you should be joining the relevant committee. You should be talking to people, because our interns will let you know too. Get a chance to talk to either of the Graces. If you have a good idea, we're likely to grab it and run with it. That's one great thing that I love about Massachusetts Peace Action. So we're changing things up with our annual meeting, right? Are we getting into magic time yet, or? I think so. Yeah, so we're going to get back to what we were doing at the very beginning of this meeting, which is giving you a chance to find out which areas of the work you can engage in. And I will welcome Evan and Elizabeth, who have just joined us. You missed your round of applause earlier, Evan. So get up now, stand up. Actually, I'm gonna make you talk. I sang your praises earlier, but I'm gonna give you a chance. I really appreciated the fact that you showed up to ask a question of the governor yesterday. Because I think it's that kind of action that really can let a small dedicated group of people really make a difference on decision makers. So you are already elected, but I want to hand the mic over to you for just a quick couple of comments.
Thank you so much. Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Evan McKay, given there's pronouns. I live in Portland Square. I do a lot of organizing in Cambridge and at the state level. And I come from labor organizing. So I helped organize the Harvard Graduate Students Union. And that gave me a lot of experiences thinking about power existing within every single person, as well as power existing within the relationships that we have with one another, the relationships of trust and the human connections that we have. It's something that can be powerful and mobilized within our movement. And so really excited to be thinking about bringing community organizing into and beyond Massachusetts Peace Act, and how we can look to all of our members as a source of our strength all throughout the state. Members as agentic, members helping determine what is it that Massachusetts Peace Action is going to do, and how are we going to do it together. So coming from labor organizing, there are a couple different models of what a union can do for you. At their very weakest, in my perspective, a union is almost like an insurance policy, like you pay your dues and then your union goes over there and then helps solve the problems. If we're to bring that analogy to Massachusetts Peace Action, one version is well, we make a donation and then they go over there and they fight for peace. Or they advocate for peace. They help bring about peace and justice. And then another framework is to think about all of us together are pushing towards peace and justice, and none of this will happen without all of us. So I'm just really excited to be doing this with all of you, and solidarity forever.
We're sorry, moving on the slide, but had to do it. Okay, so when the first time I met anyone from Massachusetts Peace Action, I showed up because there was I won't get into it, many of you heard the story, but it was the Saudi Crown Prince came to Cambridge. And it was that proximity, right? This was during the, not even early stages, 2 years into the Yemen war. He was here, and I just felt the need, either you care about this or you don't. Get out on the street, the guy's a mile, the people are out there doing something, you join them, or you really don't care about this.
What year was it?
This was 2018. This was about 6 months before he had that journalist, Jamal Khashoggi, whacked in Turkey, which made everything much more famous because he was a Washington Post columnist, as you remember. But I remember once I had met Paul and Cole and some of the other folks there, the last thing I said was, okay, so we went, we held signs, we made our displeasure known that this guy was here. What do I do now? What do I do? I have to do something. I have to take the next step. And no, it was Cole who told me, one easy thing you can do is write a letter to the editor about this or about something else related to our issues. I did that. Anyone can do it, right? 200 words or less. You know, it got published in the Globe, and next thing I knew, I was hooked, and I'm here. All this was like that. So when anyone can do that, when you ask somebody to do something small, and they can see, even if it was just a tiny little letter, they will see, oh wow, I can do something. I can have a say on these big international and national issues that I thought were far away from me, that in my opinion didn't matter. It does in this country. It still does in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And we have to relish that, and we have to exercise those muscles. So that's what we're going to do now. In the past, we've done long lists of our program areas, and instead, I'm going to let you find out for yourselves, which is why we have set up literature and signs on that side of the room. Most of that literature is interactive. You can sign up on your phone, or you can write down on the sign-up sheets. And even more importantly, and Louise made me promise to say this before she had to leave to go let her little dog out, which is important. But the importance of talking to one another, not just digital organizing, not just on staring at a computer screen or your phone, but talking to people face to face. So I want to give you the opportunity to meet some of the leaders of our working groups and campaigns who are volunteers and activists, right? They are here because they're passionate about it and they want to make a difference in the world, and they want to hear your ideas and figure out a way for you to fit into this. You're our members. We are so happy that you're here. But just as Evan said, right? We're not here so you can give us a check, big or small, and then go have us do the work. No. We ask more of you than that. We want to hear what you think, and we want to be in conversation with you. We want to get to know you better, and that's how we're going to use the balance of our time. So thanks everyone for coming. I'm going to put a little music on, though softly, and get to know each other. Talk about, and this is where our creative ideas will come from. And thank you so much for being a part of Massachusetts Peace Action and really making this all possible. Thank you very much. You got one more thing, man.
I have one more thing, which is, okay. Usually what happens at this point is people go over, grab a couple of snacks and go home. Can you all promise me that you won't? And I'll tell you why. I made me and Olivia did all those little signs. So you actually can pick and choose. Would you all please promise to at least look at one? Raise your hand if you're gonna, if you'll do that. Thank you.
And another thing that I recommend that you all leave with is a copy of our newsletter. You may have seen them on the way in. That addresses multiple issues. We put out every once in a while a print edition, but every week we put out a digital edition. And anyone can write for the Master Section newsletter. So if you got an article you're dying to write, send it to us. We can all be reached at info@maskingsaction.org. I'm Brian@maskingsaction.org. We're easy. And in case anyone's wondering, restrooms are in either direction at the end of the hall that way or at the end of the hall that way. If you walk in any direction long enough, you're gonna run into.
Yeah, but it's
And with that, everybody's gonna be mingling and, having a good time. Wait a second, I see, Judith Lord has a hand raised. Judith, you wanna, I'm sorry, we were sort of doing double duty here. I know, it's, somebody wanted, oh, sorry, can the Zoomers make comments? This is gonna have to be a room for improvement, I guess. Unless, Judith, you wanna share your comment in the chat, that would be very helpful. But there aren't too many of us here. Put it in the chat. I'll raise it over the mic. I'll do it. I know John had the same, but I never actually heard him. So pop it in the chat. I'm going to leave this open. I will, before we adjourn, raise the point. I could unmute you, but you're not plugged into the speaker. That's the problem. Hey.
Announcement.
Yes.
I don't know if he is not
Hey Judith, I thought you were gonna make your, I'm gonna let people unmute themselves. Yeah, go ahead. I thought you were gonna make your comment in the chat.
Yeah, Brian didn't think that that would work.
Unfortunately, I can't even hear you because it's so loud in here right now. Everybody's talking.
Oh,
we're
right.
The room so I can hear you properly.
Yeah, Brian didn't think that that was going to work. Because okay, so it's working. You can hear me? Hello? Where'd you go?
Can you hear us now?
Well, he's on mute. Oh.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
There's no audio right now because largely the program part of the meeting is over.
That's okay. I can talk to you if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you just fine, Judith. What's up?
Okay, I was trying to type it all out, but it's kind of long.
I just finished typing it, but
okay, Paul and I are climate activists, and we're active with Third Act and 350.org, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
You're leaving. Hold on. I'm sorry. Say bye to Grace, our new just elected.
Bye, Grace.
Wait, I had the self view so people wouldn't. But I just want to thank you so much I thought your speech was great. And
Thanks for everything.
your dad is awesome. I'm glad that your parents were here to support you. And
let me take a picture of that.
I know that they're proud. I'm sure they tell you all the time, but well, they told me so. But
take a picture.
Yeah, let's get in touch soon. We got to get down to work.
I'm gonna type in the website for are you back?
But even before then we can do something fun too. We'll get rowing together and the current interns maybe we'll
talking to someone else.